what the fibers are, just the cells. The muscle cells are really long, okay, going from there all the way down to there, really long. They extend the whole length of the muscle. So the biceps here, for example, okay, you've got individual cells or fibers that go from here to there, okay, running right alongside each other. Okay. What does it mean to say that they're multinucleate? Does that mean multiple nuclei? And you can see those out here, right? All these dark spots here, those are all nuclei. And the reason for that is during development in the embryo, we have individual cells that fuse together to make a single skeletal muscle cell. And each one of those brings its nucleus with it. That's why skeletal muscle cells have multiple nuclei. So that's one of the characteristics to remember about skeletal muscle tissue. Also, it's voluntary. So you can voluntarily flex your elbow, for example. Okay? So it's voluntary muscle. And it does have these lines here. We're going to see where those come from, why those are there, as we go and study the muscular system here. So again, those are called striations, those lines going this way. Okay. That's, again, a characteristic of skeletal muscle. All right, everybody have that? So that's skeletal muscle tissue, right? Let's contrast that now with the second type of muscle tissue, which is cardiac. Okay. So here's what cardiac muscle tissue looks like under the microscope. All right. So again, looking at that, what jumps out at you? What do you see? First of all, how is this the same as the previous picture? Okay. There's cardiac muscle. What do you see here that's the same? Striations. Striations, right? See the lines here? Okay. So you've got the lines here. This is the only place you're going to find this, like I said, is in the, what's the name of that layer in the wall of the heart that contains muscle? Myocardium. Yeah. Okay, so that's the only place in the body where you find cardiac muscle tissue, in the myocardium. Okay. How these are different, one way these are different, is the fibers. Again, the term fiber means cell. The cells are shorter and they're branching. All right, so right here, for example, you can see the branching going on. Okay, you do not see that in skeletal muscle tissue. Again, skeletal muscle, they're long, thin fibers. They do not branch. These do. Okay? So that's one difference. The second difference is, whereas skeletal muscle tissue cells have multiple nuclei, cardiac muscle tissue cells have one or two. Okay? So many fewer nuclei. Here you can see, right there, a couple nuclei. There's one there. Okay. So many fewer nuclei here. It's involuntary muscle. So what does that mean? Involuntary? You can't consciously control it, right? Which is probably a good thing. Right? You don't have to think about your heart beating. Again, a similarity is this is also striated here. So you've got these lines here. Okay. So similar to skeletal muscle tissue. Does anybody remember the dead giveaway that you're looking at, cardiac muscle, that you see up here?
Like the disc.
Say it again?
Disc, like the lines.
Yeah. These dark lines there. Anybody remember what those are called? Called intercalated discs. Right. So again, those are only seen in cardiac muscle tissue. Those intercalated discs. Now, what are those? Anybody know? What are those dark lines? Those consist of very. Go ahead.
They help with the electrical charge itself. Yeah.
Yeah, that's part of it. Yeah. So as your heart is beating, right? You don't want the cells coming apart, right? You don't want blood leaking through there. Okay. So the cells here are held very tightly together by junctions, okay, by by cellular junctions. And also, between them are little openings that allow basically electrical signals to travel from one cell to the next cell very quickly, okay, which is what you're talking about there. So that these signals, remember, pass through the heart, basically going down this way and coming back up. Remember that when we talked about the physiology of the heart? Okay? So in order for those signals to pass very quickly, you've got these gap junctions, are called, between the cells. Okay? But they're also held tightly together so that as the muscle's moving, it's not coming apart. Okay? That's what those intercalated discs are. And again, those are only found in cardiac muscle. Okay? All right, so here's smooth muscle now. Why is it called smooth? What don't you see here? Striations, right? Yep. Okay. And again, as I said, smooth muscle is found in the walls of internal organs in the body, right? Like the stomach and the intestines and so forth. And it's also found in the walls of blood vessels. And it's this muscle, remember, that controls the diameter of blood vessels, the contraction and relaxation of this muscle, because it runs around the vessel. That's what controls the size of blood vessels, the diameter of blood vessels. Okay? Now these fibers, it's kind of hard to visualize here, but these fibers are referred to as spindle-shaped. Here's what that means. Like that, okay? So they taper at the ends, right? So these are spindle-shaped fibers, and another characteristic of smooth muscle is there's one nucleus, okay? You can see them here, these darker red spots, so the nuclei. It's also involuntary. So you're, again, not consciously able to control movement of food through your GI tract, for example, right? That's not something you can, sit there and think about and make it happen, right? Also non-striated, again, that's why it's called smooth, because you do not see the lines here, the striations. All right, so you understand the differences between the three kinds of muscle tissue? Again, we're going to focus on skeletal muscle tissue because that's what makes up the muscles, the organs in the muscular system. All right, so let's talk about the muscular system now. All right. Again, the muscular system consists of over 600 muscles. And muscles pull on our bones to enable us to move around. Does anybody know the term for moving around? The technical term is locomotion. Okay? So locomotion or locomoting, that's what I'm doing right now. Okay? The muscles, and notice the abbreviation here, MM, that's just standard anatomical abbreviation for muscles plural. Okay, M is muscle singular. Okay, so the muscles again are organs. So a muscle like the biceps brachii, that's an organ. Okay, and the organs, over 600 of them, again constitute the organ system called the muscular system. Make sense? All right. Again, organs are made of tissues, and the specific type of muscle tissue that makes up the muscles is skeletal muscle. Okay, skeletal muscle tissue. All right. In addition to the muscle tissue, what else we find in muscles, the organs, is connective tissue. Okay. As well as, does anybody remember the 4 basic tissue types in the body? So we've got 2 of them here, muscle tissue, connective tissue. Anybody remember the other 2? Nervous, yeah. So we've got nervous tissue, muscle tissue, connective tissue, epithelium, right? Epithelium. endothelial tissue, right? Those are the four basic tissue types, okay? So again, within muscles, we have skeletal muscle tissue, we have connective tissue, which is called fascia. So again, when you dissect the cats in lab, you'll see this whitish, just underneath the skin, this whitish color. I'll show you a picture here. That's called fascia. Okay, so right here. So what we're looking at here, the skin has been lifted up. Okay, so there's the skin. This is the inside of the skin. This is the outside of the muscle down here. You understand the picture? Okay. So what you're looking at here, this sort of shiny stuff, and this up here, that's fascia. Okay? So that's the connective tissue. There are different kinds of fascia. So up here, you've got what's called superficial fascia. What's superficial mean? As opposed to deep, right? Yeah. So this is a superficial fascia up here, just underneath the skin. It's basically the bottom layer of the skin, called the hypodermis, it's also called. Okay? So that's just underneath the skin, that superficial fascia. And when you get the cats, they've already been skinned, so you're not going to see that. Okay, you're going to see this. Okay. And what that consists of, what that superficial fascia consists of, is a type of connective tissue called adipose tissue. What do you find in adipose tissue? Fat, right? Fat cells, yeah. Okay, so we've got adipose tissue and loose connective tissue. So way back when in lab you looked at these, I don't know if you remember, these are not, but we've got loose connective tissue where the cells are really spread out, it has a loose appearance to it under the microscope. And then you have the adipose tissue with the cells that have what's called the signet ring appearance because the nucleus has been pushed to one side of the cell. Do you remember this or not? Yeah, okay, all right, doesn't matter, it's okay. So those two together are found in this tissue up here. Okay, so that's what constitutes this superficial fascia up here. And then down here, in this picture, you have deep fascia. Okay, now deep fascia is different because it's made of a different kind of tissue, different kind of connective tissue. So up here, this has a looser appearance to it. Down here, it's denser, tighter, okay? Because it's made of fibrous connective tissue that has a lot of fibers in it, so it gives it a tighter consistency. Okay? And this is what lines the inside of the walls of the body, like your chest cavity on the inside is lined by this kind of tissue. And also the upper limbs and the lower limbs are lined on the inside, again, just deep to the skin, by this kind of tissue called deep fascia. Okay, with me here so far? All right. And, as we'll see, it holds the muscles together. This deep fascia holds muscles together. So in other words, when you do your dissection in the lab, this is what you have, this is what's holding the muscles together, and you have to cut through this to separate the muscles. But be careful you're not cutting into a muscle. Make sure you're separating individual muscles when you do this, okay? There's a technique to it, you'll learn about it. All right, so everybody understand that so far? All right, in addition to deep fascia, also gives off extensions. First of all, they go into the muscle, into a muscle. Okay, so the deep fascia, this connective tissue, this sort of whitish tissue, goes into the muscle. And first of all, on the very outside of a muscle, it is called the epimysium. Epi means upon or above. My, whenever you see my in anatomy, anybody know what that's referring to? Muscle. Right. Okay, so literally above the muscle or upon the muscle. So take a look at the closer view of this picture. So here you see an actual micrograph up there. Here's a drawing of the same thing. So the epimysium, that's this right here. It's all the way around the muscle. That's called the epimysium. Okay. And up here, here's a muscle that's been cut in cross section. So you can see the whitish there. It goes all the way around. That's the epimysium. Is that clear? All right. So that's the epimysium. Okay. Now notice before I zoom back out, the muscle is organized here by this tissue, this connective tissue. Right. So we've got the epimysium along the outside. And then we have perimysium. Perimysium. The perimysium is an extension of the epimysium. And what it does is it dives into a muscle and divides that muscle into bundles, which are called fascicles. Okay? A fascicle is a bundle of muscle cells. So again, take a look at this picture here. All right. So right here, what's been projected out right here, that's a bundle, that's a fascicle. And here's another one, there's another one, there's another one. See that? And that what that is a bundle of is individual muscle cells. Each of these is a muscle cell. You can see the fibers coming out this way, right? Everybody understand? So that bundle right there is surrounded by this connective tissue, which is called perimysium. Right? So there's a perimysium there. Again, up here, you can see perimysium there, right? Surrounding those bundles. All right? Understand? And then, the extensions of the perimysium surround each individual muscle cell, each individual muscle fiber, and that is called endomysium. Now, when we get into the nervous system, look at nervous tissue, you'll see the setup is pretty similar to this. So our nerves are also organized by connective tissue like this. All right, does everybody understand that? So you have the terms, and somebody might ask you this, epimysium, perimysium, endomysium, and you should understand what those mean. Right? Got it? Okay. So again, the connective tissue goes into the muscle, dividing it, organizing it. And it also extends beyond the muscle in a couple different ways to form a couple different structures. So, first of all, tendons. So what a tendon is like, for example, if you get tendonitis, that's inflammation of a tendon, like tennis elbow, for example. Right? So the tendon is what connects the muscle to the bone. If you remember, there's connective tissue around a bone. Anybody remember the term for that? It surrounds the entire bone. It's not bone tissue. It's another type of fibrous connective tissue called periosteum. Remember that term? Okay. So what happens during development of the muscles and the bones is this connective tissue extends beyond the end of the bone. That's the periosteum. It fuses with the perimysium here. So those two fuse together to form the tendon right there. Okay? So that's, again, what a tendon is. It's an extension of the connective tissue beyond the muscle, fusing with what's extended beyond the bone. That's a tendon. Clear? All right. And then secondly, we have what are called aponeuroses. Aponeuroses. Aponeurosis, singular. And so the difference here is whereas tendons connect muscle to bone, aponeuroses can interconnect muscles. So here's an example in this drawing here of an aponeurosis. Okay. So going right across the top of your skull. Here's a muscle in your forehead called the frontalis. There's a muscle in the back called the occipitalis. Those muscles are interconnected by this tissue right here. Okay? That's an example of an aponeurosis, of a cranial aponeurosis. Okay? Everybody understand? All right. And again, this is all part of the fascia, right? The fascia that you find dividing muscles and organizing them. All right. Everybody okay with that? All right. Next, we have different types of muscles. Again, over 600 of them, and they're organized based on what they do to cause a particular action. Okay? So, three types here. We have what's called a prime mover, which is also called an agonist. So, the prime mover or agonist, that's the muscle that's causing the action. So when you extend your elbow, what's the prime mover? Say again? The triceps brachii back here, right? That's what's causing that action, right? So therefore, in that particular action, the triceps brachii is called the prime mover or the agonist. Follow? Okay. A synergist is a muscle that is not directly causing the action, but it's supporting the action by stabilizing joints. Okay? So it's not the prime mover, it's not what's causing that particular action, but it's helping to stabilize the joints. So for example, the other muscles here are helping to stabilize the elbow joint when you do this. They're not causing that action. All right? And then the third type is called an antagonist. Okay? An antagonist opposes the movement. So again, when you extend your elbow, extend your forearm, the prime mover is the what? The triceps brachii, right? What would be an example of an antagonist in that movement? The biceps, right? Also the brachialis, as you'll learn. Okay? On the other hand, if you bend your elbow, what's the prime mover? Biceps, right? And the antagonist? Triceps. See how that works? Okay? So they switch roles depending on what action we're talking about. Understand? Okay. All right. So muscles that have named parts to them. All right. First of all, what's called the origin. I've referred to this a couple times. The origin, in the normal action of that muscle, whatever the normal action is, the origin is the end that has the least amount of motion. Okay? So here's the biceps brachii right here. So normally you do this, right? Normally you would flex your elbow, not move your entire body this way, right? Understand? So the normal action is this. Right? So therefore, these tendons up here are attached at up here on the scapula. Okay? So those are called the origins. We got two origins up here. That's why it's called biceps. All right. The insertion, the term insertion, refers to the end that does most of the motion, most of the moving. Right. So down here you can see the insertion is on the radius. Okay. So that's why when this muscle shortens, it pulls up that way. So you have that flexion of the elbow. That make sense, everybody? Okay. And then in the middle, we have what's called either the belly or the body of the muscle right here. That's where all the shortening happens, the contraction that we're going to talk about. So we'll take a look at the nature of contraction, exactly what's going on there. probably on Wednesday. Okay, so far? All right. Muscles are named in different ways. Nomenclature just means naming, how things are named. So again, we've got over 600 muscles. You're going to study some of them in lab. And all these muscles have names, and the names are based on different criteria. Okay, so let's go over some of the major criteria. So first of all, some muscles are named based on where they originate and where they insert. The origin, insertion. Okay, so again, what's the difference between those two terms? Origin versus insertion? Right. Okay, so the origin is the least movable end of the muscle. The insertion is the most movable end. Right? Here's an example. Have you heard of this muscle? Big long word. You can abbreviate it SCM. Okay, sternocleidomastoid muscle. All right, here it is right here. There's your sternocleidomastoid. So if you turn your head, you can feel it right there. Sternocleidomastoid. So why is it called that? Can anybody explain why it's called sternocleidomastoid? Yep, go ahead.
It starts in your sternum, the origin's right here,
Yep.
and it inserts into your mastoid process back here.
Exactly. Right. Remember that bump is called the mastoid process there on the temporal bone? Remember that? Yeah. So the origin is on the sternum here, the breastbone. And what about the cleido part of that? The clavicle, collarbone. Yeah. So the origin is here on the collarbone and on the sternum. And then the insertion is up here on the mastoid process. So that's why it's called that. Make sense? Okay. All right. Another criterion that's used to name muscles is the number of heads of origin. Right? Number of heads of origin. Okay. So the biceps brachii, again, why is it called biceps?
Two heads.
Two heads of origin, right? Okay. Quadriceps, femoris, quadriceps, your quads. So why is that called quadriceps? Four heads of origin, right? Okay. So it actually consists of four muscles that make up the quadriceps. Yeah. Okay. So again, biceps literally means two heads, quadriceps literally means four heads. Yeah. All right, so that's another criterion that's used to name muscles. The third criterion is the size of the muscle. An example of that is the pectoralis major. Here you can see the pectoralis major right here, that muscle right there in the chest. And then deep to that is another muscle that's smaller. What do you suppose that one's called? Pectoralis minor, right, okay. So this one's bigger, that's why it's called major, and the one deep to that you don't see there is called the pec minor. Okay, is that clear? So that's another criterion. Another one is based on the shape. Some muscles are named based on their shape. So where's the deltoid muscle? What do you know? In your shoulder, right? So you see it right there. There's the deltoid. Okay. Anybody have any idea why it's called that? Deltoid. Huh?
Isn't delta triangle?
Right. So what's delta look like? What's a delta look like? No. Right. That's a delta, right? That's a Greek letter delta. Flip it upside down. You have what the deltoid muscle looks like. Okay. Yeah, so that's why it's called that. Okay, next we have action. Some muscles are named based on what they do, what their action is. So here you see the extensor digitorum muscles. Extensor digitorum. Let me show you them. So here are the extensor digitorum muscles in here. Right? So extensor digitorum, what do you think they do? They extend the digits, right, right. So this is flexion, extend the digits, that's what they do. So the digits refer to the digits. Another criterion is based on the way the muscle fibers run, the muscle cells run. Okay, the direction of the muscle fibers. So here you see these muscles here that are running that way. Everybody see what I'm talking about? So your abdominal muscles here, the ones that are running this way. Something called the external abdominal oblique. Remember what the term oblique refers to in anatomical terminology? At an angle. Right? So these are running at an angle like this. And they're closer to the surface underneath the skin, so they're called external and abdominal because they're covering over the abdominal cavity. Okay, so that's another criterion. And then another criterion is the location. Some muscles are named based on their location in the body. So right here, back up to this picture, is part of the quadriceps. This muscle right here, in the front of your thigh, that's called the rectus femoris. Rectus femoris. So why do you think it's called that? Where's it located?
Correct.
Over the femur, right? Over the thigh bone. It's called rectus because it's pretty straight. Rect means straight. Okay? So that's the rectus femoris right there, part of the quadriceps. Okay, and there it is right there. Rectus femoris. Okay. All right, so any questions about any of this? I think that's a good place to stop for today. And we'll pick up there on Wednesday. Does anybody have any questions? No? Okay. All right. Well, have a good couple days. All right. And there's another book listed there that's optional. Okay.
All right.
All right.
Thank you.
Yep.